For over 1,000 years, the name Rome echoed across continents, synonymous with power, law, innovation, and an unshakable sense of permanence. From the scorching sands of North Africa to the misty forests of Britannia, its legions marched, its engineers built, and its emperors ruled. They gave us concrete, efficient governance, legal systems still mimicked today, and a cultural legacy so profound, we still feel its reverberations in our language, architecture, and very concept of civilization. Rome was, in every sense, the ultimate superpower. It seemed eternal, indomitable. Yet, eventually, even the mightiest fall. The Western Roman Empire, that seemingly invincible colossus, did collapse. But the story isn't the simple tale we often hear of barbarian hordes kicking down the gates. The real reasons are far more intricate, insidious, and, frankly, stranger than fiction. It's a mystery more compelling than any Stranger Things season finale, with twists and turns that defy easy explanation. Imagine an empire so vast, its borders stretched for thousands of miles. Maintaining control over such a sprawling domain was an administrative nightmare. The sheer cost of defending those frontiers, of supplying legions in distant lands, began to bleed the treasury dry. It was a logistical challenge that grew exponentially with every new conquest. The economy, once a powerhouse, started to falter. Inflation became rampant. Emperors, desperate for funds to pay soldiers and maintain public works, began to debase the coinage, mixing precious metals with cheaper ones. This, in turn, eroded public trust and further destabilized the markets. Political instability became a chronic disease. Emperors rose and fell with alarming frequency, often at the hands of their own armies. This constant upheaval meant policies were rarely consistent, reforms were abandoned, and the empire lacked the steady hand it desperately needed. Loyalty fragmented, replaced by ambition and fear. Even the land itself seemed to turn against them. Climate change, though not understood at the time, brought colder, wetter weather to parts of the empire, impacting harvests and exacerbating economic woes. Plagues, like the Antoine Plague, decimated populations, leaving vast tracts of land unworried and armies understaffed. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a systemic rot. The very backbone of Rome, its legions, began to transform. As fewer Romans volunteered, the empire increasingly relied on barbarian recruits from the very tribes they were meant to defend against. These soldiers were loyal to their commander, or to the pay, not necessarily to Rome itself. This created a dangerous paradox. The army was Rome's strength, but also its greatest drain and a source of internal power struggles. Emperors needed the army to survive, but the army often dictated who would be emperor. The promise of land and loot became more compelling than abstract ideals of Roman citizenship. To manage the endless incursions, Rome often resorted to diplomacy, bribery, and settling barbarian groups within its borders, offering them land in exchange for military service. This was a temporary solution that, over time, blurred the lines between defender and aggressor, between Roman and other. The seeds of future conflicts were often sown in these uneasy alliances. The constant state of war, the financial strain, and the internal strife meant the vast resources of Rome were perpetually diverted. Instead of investing in innovation or infrastructure development that once defined them, they were locked in a desperate struggle for survival. The relentless demands of military expenditure became a crushing burden. Rome's vast economy relied heavily on trade and conquest. New conquests brought new wealth, slaves, and resources. But as the empire stopped expanding, that easy influx of wealth dried up. The focus shifted from offensive growth to defensive stagnation. Urban centers, once vibrant hubs of commerce and culture, began to shrink. People moved away from the cities, seeking self-sufficiency in the countryside. The once robust tax base eroded as productive lands lay fallow or became controlled by powerful, localized landowners who often evaded imperial taxes. This led to a process historians call ruralization. The intricate network of trade and centralized administration gave way to a more localized, almost feudal system. Why would a farmer sell his grain to a distant city for debased currency, when he could trade it locally for goods and protection? This fundamentally weakened the central government's control and its ability to raise revenue. The loss of reliable currency, the breakdown of infrastructure like roads and bridges due to lack of maintenance, and the constant threat of banditry or invasion made large-scale commerce risky and difficult. It became increasingly difficult for average citizens to access the goods and services they once took for granted. The question of whether is Walmart open on Thanksgiving would have been absurd. Even finding a local market was becoming a challenge for many. The vast chasm between the rich and the poor widened dramatically. The wealthy elite grew richer, often at the expense of the working class and the peasantry, who bore the brunt of taxes and military service. This created deep social resentment and a feeling of alienation from the state. The reliance on slave labor for agriculture and other industries meant that there was less incentive for technological innovation or for paying free citizens decent wages. This stagnation further limited economic growth and contributed to widespread unemployment among the free population, leaving them disillusioned and disengaged. The famed bread and circuses, free grain and gladiatorial games, were initially designed to keep the populace content and prevent unrest. But over time, they became less about civic engagement and more about pacifying a population that felt increasingly disconnected from the political process. This fostered apathy rather than active participation. Education and civic pride, once hallmarks of Roman identity, began to wane. Why invest in learning or public service when the future seemed so uncertain and the rewards so minimal? The sense of shared Roman identity, of belonging to something greater, slowly eroded, replaced by regional loyalties or simple self-preservation. A pivotal moment came with the official division of the Roman Empire into eastern and western halves. While initially intended as an administrative solution, it created two distinct entities with different priorities and fates. The West, already struggling, was now largely on its own. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, was strategically wealthier, more urbanized, and less exposed to barbarian invasions from the north. It had a more robust economy and a stronger military. While the West crumbled, the East, later known as the Byzantine Empire, would endure for another 1,000 years. This division meant that when the Western Empire faced its gravest threats, it often received little aid from its wealthier Eastern counterpart, which was focused on its own survival. The resources, political will, and military might were simply no longer unified in defense of the old Roman heartland. The two halves began to drift apart culturally and even religiously, with the West centered on Rome and the East on Constantinople. While theoretically one empire, in practice, there were two distinct powers, and the western half was simply too fragile to withstand the mounting pressures without unified support. While not the sole cause, the barbarian migrations and invasions were undeniably the final, crushing blows. But these weren't just random acts of aggression. Often, these tribes were pushed by their own internal pressures, or by more terrifying forces like the Huns, into Roman territory. Rome's inability to effectively repel or integrate these groups highlighted its deep-seated weaknesses. The barbarians weren't just external enemies. They were often former allies, mercenaries, or even Roman citizens living on the fringes, now pushed to desperation. The sack of Rome by Alaric's Visigoths in 410 CE was a psychological shockwave. Though not as destructive as often portrayed, it shattered the myth of Rome's invincibility. If the eternal city itself could be breached, what hope was there for the provinces? The traditional date for the fall of Rome is 476 CE, when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. This wasn't a cataclysmic battle. It was almost an administrative handover. The empire didn't collapse overnight. It slowly disintegrated, like a building whose foundations had been eroding for centuries. Perhaps the most insidious factor was the decay of the Roman spirit itself. The ideals of civic duty, public service, and fierce loyalty to the Republic and later the Empire gradually eroded. Why fight and die for a system that seemed increasingly unable to protect its own people or provide a stable future? The rule of law, once Rome's proudest achievement, became inconsistent and often corrupt. Justice was not always blind, and the powerful often escaped accountability. This further alienated ordinary citizens and undermined their faith in the system. Innovation and intellectual curiosity, once vibrant, became less emphasized. The focus shifted from solving problems to simply maintaining the status quo, or worse, succumbing to superstition and fatalism. The intellectual and technological dynamism that propelled Rome for centuries began to fade. The complex infrastructure that bound the empire together, its roads, aqueducts, public buildings, fell into disrepair. The resources, expertise, and political will to maintain them simply vanished in many areas. As these physical connections broke down, so too did the cohesion of the empire. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event, but a long, drawn-out process, a slow, agonizing transformation rather than a sudden catastrophe. It was the culmination of deeply interconnected political, economic, social, environmental, and military factors, each exacerbating the others until the weight became unbearable. There's no single villain, no solitary cause. Instead, it was a complex interplay, a web of vulnerabilities that ultimately unraveled. The barbarians were merely the final push against an edifice already crumbling from within. Yet, Rome never truly died. Its legacy endured, shaping the languages, laws, religions, and cultures of Europe and beyond. Its collapse paved the way for new societies, new forms of governance, and eventually, the rise of the medieval world. It was a transformation, not an annihilation. The story of Rome's fall is a powerful reminder that even the greatest empires are fragile. It teaches us about the dangers of unchecked power, economic inequality, political paralysis, and the vital importance of adaptability. It reminds us that history is not just about battles and emperors, but about the intricate dance of societal forces. What do you think was the biggest factor in Rome's decline? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this journey into ancient history as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button, subscribe to Nexus Historians, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the ancient world. Next time, we'll be heading east to uncover the hidden secrets of the pyramids. Join us then. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand our present.